we've made a lot of mistakes in predicting how this conflict would go, and it worries me that we're not looking at this seriously enough, and there's not enough effort being put into pressing both sides to start serious negotiations to at least get some kind of ceasefire.
It is not often that we actually see public protests in Iran or in Russia, but the people there are apparently fed up with their leadership, and protests are all they believe they have left. Fred Fleitz served in the National Security Council and is joining us again tonight. Fred, good to see you.
Hey, Doug, good to be here.
Before we get into those issues and other Iran-related issues and the Ukraine war-related issues, I want to ask you about a late-breaking development which occurred overnight. There are apparently ruptures in 3 separate areas of both the Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 gas pipelines, which carry natural gas, were intended to carry natural gas, I should say, from Russia to Europe, primarily to Germany. Now, it looks increasingly like there was a case of sabotage. Who would have a motivation to sabotage those gas pipelines?
Well, it's a bizarre development that apparently, Russia might sabotage its own gas pipeline that it would earn revenue from shipping natural gas to Europe. That's what the speculation seems to be today, unless this was some type of natural occurrence. But as you said, since this happened in 3 separate parts of the pipeline, and since the Russians have the capability with a new submarine to do this, it may have been Russia, but how this would benefit Russia, it's another unforeseen event in this conflict with Russia.
Right. And that broadens us out now to the war in Ukraine itself and what Mr. Putin is up to. Not only has he threatened a potential nuclear attack, but he has also started a new policy of conscription of young soldiers, calling up an estimated 300,000 men to serve in the military, presumably for the war in Ukraine. Tremendous resistance against that. We're seeing protests in Russia, which is not a safe thing to be doing in Russia. How does all this play out?
Well, I think this whole war is a matter of people not making unpredicted outcomes. The Russians did not understand how weak their military was. They didn't understand how strong the Ukrainian military would be. I think Biden thought his threats of sanctions would stop the conflict. What I'm worried right now is there a red line that we could cross that could possibly lead Putin to use nuclear weapons? There's talk right now that we may be giving Putin tanks, maybe F-16s. Will a point come when Putin has suffered such massive military losses that he would turn to this? I know that seems like a far-off possibility, and a lot of U.S. officials are writing it off, but we've made a lot of mistakes in predicting how this conflict would go, and it worries me that we're not looking at this seriously enough, and there's not enough effort being put into pressing both sides to start serious negotiations to at least get some kind of ceasefire.
Have you gotten any indication from people you know in the national security industry that the U.S. is trying to bring both sides to the table?
No, Doug, I think what we're doing is we're gambling on the idea that if we give Ukraine enough weapons, it will win. It will force Russia to withdraw. It will force Putin to be overthrown. And I hope that happens. But something else might happen. Putin may decide not to withdraw. He may dig in, and he may suffer losses so enormous that he would turn to the unthinkable, such as nuclear chemical weapons. And it just seems to me that this administration has no concept that that is a possibility, and it's a growing possibility right now. We're not dealing with it.
Mm-hmm. Similar protests over a different issue happening in Iran, and they seem to be growing by the tens of thousands of people. It all started with the arrest of a woman who refused to wear the headscarf in Iran some weeks ago. She was imprisoned. She was apparently tortured there and has now lost her life and has become the center point, a martyr, so to speak, for protests in Iran. What do you make of those protests? What should the United States be doing?
My friend Michael Ledeen, a leading expert on Iran, has been saying for years that a revolution is coming to Iran. The people want freedom. The majority of the people, the vast majority of the people, do not like this fanatic theocracy. They're being kept down. They're suffering because of mismanagement, because of corruption, and the over 1,000 sanctions that Donald Trump put on this country. Now, this was basically a catalyst for these massive protests. It spread to over 80 cities. At least 100 Iranians have been killed. It worries me that the Iranian regime probably has the capabilities to put down this protest. But, Doug, the revolution in Iran is coming. The people aren't going to stand for this. More than 60% of the population is under the age of 30. They do not like this government. And I hope this is the time that they're overthrown. I'm worried that we might not be there yet, but I'm hopeful.
And in the midst of all that, we have the Biden administration still pursuing this nuclear deal with Iran. I know that you are a supporter of what Congress has introduced called the Punish Act, introduced by Senator Johnny Ertz, a Republican of Iowa, and also Congressman Mike Waltz of Florida. The Punish Act would enforce Iranian sanctions until our Secretary of State certifies to Congress that Iran has not supported any attempt or activity to kill U.S. citizens or embark upon these assassination plots. So Iran is still doing that?
We're trying to give Iran $1 trillion in sanctions relief by 2030. Now, the Obama nuclear deal gave it $150 billion, even though Iran has active plots to assassinate current and former U.S. officials. And you know there was an indictment recently on an attempt to assassinate John Bolton. Basically, what Senator Ernst and other members of Congress are saying is, look, you're trying to negotiate a bad deal, but there shouldn't be talks at all until Iran agrees to stop trying to kill American citizens. And when we asked for that in the negotiations, the Iranians said no, and the Biden administration just moved on. Well, I congratulate members of Congress on both sides of the aisle for saying that that's unacceptable.
Is it a foregone conclusion on the present route, in your mind, that Iran will develop a nuclear weapon?
It looks likely right now that someday Iran is going to get a nuclear weapon. It never stopped its development of it. I think tough sanctions is the best way to delay the day that happens until the government is overthrown. But this terrible agreement that we're thinking of giving the Iranians would give it the money it would use to develop nuclear weapons, to develop its missile program. To take it out, I think we'd have to destroy all its nuclear facilities with airstrikes, and we wouldn't be sure we got them all. So there's no easy answer here.
And does that lead to a broader war, not only in the Middle East, but perhaps throughout the Asian continent and Europe?
I don't think so. And I think when Iran is ready to test a nuclear weapon, that will be a fateful decision, because once they're close to doing that, I think Israel will attack. They'll destroy their underground test facility. Iran can't be sure a nuclear weapon will work. They'll have to conduct multiple tests. We are a long way off before Iran would have an operational nuclear weapon. We don't want them to get there. I think they could have one operational weapon in about 18 months, not months away, as Biden officials say. But I think we have to deal with this realistically.
Well, Fred, there's no sign that this conflict is going to ebb, or the threat is going to ebb. So stay tuned, right? Please come back. We always value your perspective and your expertise.
Good to be here. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Doug McKelway, and thank you for watching Centerpoint. We hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. Leave a comment below and keep the conversation going by sharing this video with a friend who needs to see it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.